drill sergeant. Another nugget for a fiery trial. A jewel being collected by God. Jesus. Was death his end? Again, I say Jesus. Was death his end? You see, many of us today, we believe Jesus is alive. But he did die because there was a dead body. First, the man was dead. Jesus of Nazareth died in a horrible and very public manner on a Roman cross, or torture stake, some call it. Thousands witnessed it. He died in a comparatively short time, 6 hours. Was he really dead when he was taken down from the cross on that first Good Friday and laid in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb? Maybe he was still just alive. Maybe he revived in the cool of the tomb. Maybe that is how the Easter story began. No, that won't do. He was dead, all right. The Jews were very fussy not to have their Sabbath days defiled by bodies hanging on crosses. So it was politic for Romans to take them down if they were well and truly dead. What they did was to take a big hammer and break the legs of the poor wretches who tried to gasp an extra breath or two by hoisting themselves up on their crosses by their legs. Crucifixion imposed the most terrible strain on the chest. Once their legs were broken, they soon expired or died. But when they came to Jesus, the soldiers found he was dead already. So they did not break his legs. One of them simply stuck his spear into the side of Jesus and, listen to me real carefully, pierced his heart. Had Jesus still been alive, bright arterial blood would have come out of the wound. As it was, an eyewitness, probably his friend John himself, tells us that out of that womb came blood and water. This is a totally pre-scientific description of what the mixture of dark blood and translucent serum would have looked like. And the separation of blood from serum is one of the strongest legal and medical proofs of death. Out came blood and water. He was dead, all right. The executioner certified his death to Pilate, the governor of the province. If he had gotten it wrong, his own life would have been on the line. If Pilate got it wrong, his job would have been on the line. Neither of them got it wrong. The man was dead. The body was given to a couple of his followers for burial. So we can rule out of court any of those theories about Jesus reviving in the cool of the tomb. There was no reviving. He was dead. An empty tomb. The next thing to notice is that the tomb of Jesus was empty on the first Easter day. That is the Christian claim, and nobody was able to deny it. The Jews could not deny it, although the proclamation of the resurrection of Jesus caused mayhem in the streets of Jerusalem. The Romans could not deny it, though it was the most embarrassing event in all the 10 years of Pontius Pilate's prefecture of Judea. The tomb was empty. Why? There are only two possibilities. It could only be empty because someone stole or because God raised Jesus from the dead. There are no other options. Right? Let us go for the easier option first. Who would have wanted to remove the body of Jesus? His enemies? Hardly. They had been plotting night and day to put him in that tomb. Now they had succeeded. They were not going to be moved or move his body, not at any price. And if for any perverse reason they had done so, they would have been in a marvelous position to discredit the claims of the Christians once they started a near revolution in Jerusalem by proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus. They would only have needed to produce the body, but they could not do. And incidentally, the tomb of Jesus never became a place of pilgrimage, as was the case with other dead heroes. But could not his friends have moved the body? It seems attractive at first, but it will not do. The disciples were transformed. They went all over the Mediterranean world preaching with might and main that God had raised Jesus from the dead. Would they have done that if they knew it was not true? Would they have faced torture and martyrdom, which actually befell many of them, if they knew it simply was not true? That Jesus had risen from the dead? I think not. You can let yourself be killed for a mistake, maybe, but not for a fraud. It is simply inconceivable that the dynamic growth of the early church and its total lack of fear could have risen from deceit. Besides, the disciples had cherished no expectation that Jesus would rise from the grave. And what is more, there was a guard on the tomb. It is very difficult to see how they could have raided the grave of Jesus, even if they wanted to. And the Gospels make it very clear that they did not want to. And the Gospels make it very clear that they had no desire to. Most of them simply wanted to save their skins by getting out from under this terrible Jesus fiasco. They fled back to Galilee fast. Very well then. If Jesus was not removed from the tomb by either his friends or his enemies, what possibilities remain? Only one. He was raised by God. And that is what every strand of the New Testament asserts. There is one more delightful detail about the empty tomb of Jesus we must not miss. John's Gospel tells us that it was Mary of Magdala who first met Jesus after the resurrection. In shock, she rushed back to the disciples and told them. Peter and John ran to the tomb. John got there first. He was the younger man. When Peter puffed up, sighing and breathing hard, he actually entered the tomb. It was empty, apart from the grave clothes of Jesus, and these were very significantly arranged. The strips of linen that had been wound around his body were in one place. The covering that hadn't been around his head was in another. Do you see what this means? The grave clothes were undisturbed, but the body was gone, like a chrysalis case when the butterfly has emerged. No wonder the two disciples went home thinking furiously. The empty tomb was and remains a powerful indicator that Jesus was no longer dead, but had somehow been raised to new life. A crowd of witnesses. But the Christian faith in the resurrection of Jesus does not rest on an empty tomb. Let me say that again. The Christian faith in the resurrection of Jesus does not rest on an empty tomb. Far from it. That would be much the same as to say that we believe in butterflies because of the empty chrysalis cases. We believe in butterflies because we see them. And that was the inestimable privilege of the first disciples of Jesus. They saw him again. They saw him. They talked with him. They ate with him for a full 40 days. They did not believe in his resurrection because the tomb was empty. They believed because they had personally encountered the risen Jesus. Have you encountered the risen Jesus? Sometimes it was in an upper room, like the one where they celebrated that last Passover together. Sometimes it was on a walk. Sometimes it was when they were gathered for prayer. Sometimes it was when they were out fishing. Jesus appeared to them in a variety of contexts. He taught them more about the kingdom of God and how they were to make it known. Those 6 weeks of companionship with the risen Jesus were conclusive. They knew he was alive. Jesus was alive. And of course, it made such a difference to them. No longer were they embarrassed or terrified. They were full of confidence. You find them out on the streets telling all and everyone that Jesus was alive again and calling everybody to follow him into the kingdom of God. Will you follow Jesus today into the kingdom of God? Do you know in your heart that Jesus is alive? He is no longer dead. This is just another nugget for a fiery trial. Was Jesus' death the end? Drill Sergeant.